something beside me, a light to the kerosene, and the places aren't real anymore, and the faces don't say anything, in the silent light of the mind-blown sphere. It's a game, Devil's Chess Club. Devil's Chess Club.
Welcome to Devil's Chess Club. I'm Aaron Good. Today, Bryce, Greene, and I are going to be discussing a number of current, deep political events and issues, including the assassination attempt in which an apparent would-be assassin killed a bystander but only managed to hit his target, Donald Trump, on the ear. We're also going to briefly discuss Trump's new running mate. This episode of Devil's Chess Club is available to everyone, courtesy of Four Died Trying, the new documentary film series which explores the extraordinary lives and cataclysmic assassinations of JFK, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and RFK. Please visit fourdiedtrying.com for details. Devil's Chess Club is an American Exception production. Subscribe to the American Exception podcast on Patreon for access to the podcast that explores the deep politics of the U.S. empire. We have over 170 episodes and counting, including the Peter Dale Scott Oral History series and a currently ongoing series featuring Ben Howard and I as we discuss Peter Dale Scott's overlooked work on Far West and the global drug metagroup. Bryce, Greene, great to be back with you.
It's good to be here, Aaron.
So, Bryce, I heard that you you got to talk to some very serious British journalists, and the interview was not as fruitful an exchange of ideas as you had planned. And it looks like we'll be able to show the entire thing because it's only about 2.5 minutes long here. So, I think maybe without getting any or do you want to offer any preface for this? How about that?
The only preface is that British media is insane, and it's full of insane people. And it honestly makes places like CNN and MSNBC and Fox News look like Socrates' school. But that's the nature of their media ecosystem. So roll the clip. There is no real intro. They invited me on. They first asked me whether or not I was still in prison, which obviously I wasn't.
It's a remarkable exchange here. And it's short, but it is remarkable. So I'll just play it.
And as you see here, it got picked up by Al Jazeera and other places, but this was originally on Talk TV, which is on that whatever British that hosts Piers Morgan.
Right. Yeah. This is something. So here we go.
Why are you wearing that scarf around your neck, by the way?
It's a symbol of support for the Palestinian liberation movement.
Really? What is the Palestinian liberation movement? Are they not Hamas?
Hamas is part of the resistance to Israel's occupation and is folded into a broader struggle against Zionism and colonialism.
Yeah. Oh, so, okay, colonialism. What is colonialism?
What is colonialism?
Exactly.
In this case, you have Israel, which is supported by many colonial powers at the time, was founded in 1948 as an extension of British imperialism and U.S. imperialism.
Yeah. But they're indigenous people. The colonizers were the people that kicked the Jews out of their
indigenous land. Would you do me a favour
land?
while we carry this out? Because I don't approve of you wearing what is support for a terrorist organisation. Could you take the scarf off?
I will not take the scarf off.
Why not?
It's actually a British Army uniform, you know. That's
if you have a problem with the scarf, then you can kick me off the interview. But if this interview will continue, I will be wearing it.
Yeah. Well, you're not. You know, the fact is that you are one of the reasons why the problems in Gaza are still going on, because you're giving the terrorist organisation there the idea that they have got lots and lots of support. You might have a few stupid
people who are more responsible
at
for
university
in Gaza.
Oh yeah, go on.
People who are sending weapons to Gaza. The 2,000-pound bombs that were halted and replaced with 500-pound bombs that are being used to kill civilians. I think the people sending those weapons are more responsible for what's going on in Gaza.
You obviously then you're a supporter of genocide. You think that the Hamas are a bunch of
resistance
fighters.
Is rape resistance then? In
they are very obviously resisting a genocide.
Do you deny the rapes happened? Do you say they didn't happen?
I mean, it's very obvious that Israel lied about the mass rape.
Oh, no, it's all right. Say no more. I know where you're coming from, mate. We know where you're a denier. You're a denier.
If you are able to read, and I don't know if that's the case, there was an excellent article published in Middle East Monitor.
I know you think you're very clever, but you sit there like a complete and utter stupid fool.
You look like an idiot.
Wearing a piece of clothing. Why don't you go and live in the Middle East if you're such a fan of the Middle East? Why don't you do that and do some use instead of sitting there talking complete and utter what we would use the word bollocks probably in this country?
Oh.
Oh, it's bollocks, is it? Well, I could explain to you why it's a dumb question, or we could talk about serious issues.
Bye-bye.
No, explain.
All right, bye-bye. No, I don't want to talk to the bloke anymore. I don't want to look at the scarf. He's a complete and utter crass.
He's a national security threat.
You're a national security threat. That was really something.
And they were very clearly showing themselves to be, dumbasses. It wasn't like I expected to have a legit discussion with them. The first time I went on that show, I didn't know what to expect. I just accepted an interview because I just say, yeah, to an interview. It went about as bad as that. They called me a Holocaust denier, and et cetera, et cetera. Like, oh, you're part of the problem, whatever. But then they invited me back after I was like, I texted the producer. I was like, well, this is pretty terrible. And they were like, oh, sorry. And then they emailed me later, and then they said, oh, would you like to come on? I said, well, is it going to be more serious this time? And they said, well, there won't be a guest host. 'Cause I guess I was on there with like a guest host instead of that James guy. And I said, okay, fine. But, I didn't really expect much. So then, I show up there, and of course they come out guns blazing, and I'm like, okay, well, let's see how far this goes. I didn't expect them to be as insane about the keffiyeh because they've had people on their show.
Why bother?
Yeah, they've had people on their show wearing keffiyehs before, so I guess they just wanted an excuse to kick me off. Who knows? But hopefully,
that was ridiculous. And when he's asking you to define colonizer, I think this is he's just hoping. I mean, that's kind of like the sort of casual white supremacy of these people. I think that they're just hoping that your like sociological, historiographical definitions will be like not, there at the ready, and so then they could laugh at you or whatever. Like that's like an extremely, petty and that's just very crappy way to act. And then saying that they like that they were that it's really the people of the Middle East that were the colonizers because they kicked the Jews out, ignoring the like European, the fact that the people behind Zionism were not those. They were a totally different group of people by and large. I mean,
what's hilarious is that after I was kicked off, I went back and looked at it. But if you keep going on the segment, they're talking about it's crazy how kids think the British Empire was so bad. We'd be we wouldn't have nearly as much wealth as we have without the British Empire. It was a very good thing. Just typical right-wing old boy British nonsense.
Yeah,
it's kind of amusing, and I don't want to spend too much time thinking about them or whatever. But it's very obvious that they're not there to have serious discussions. I came on there with the ability to have a serious discussion, but not expecting one. So what was it all for? Well, I got a nice clip out of it, and they got a nice clip out of it, and they get to go to their supporters and they'll say, "Oh wow, you really showed that terrorist." And then
you're a national security threat. That's that part's great.
And then I get to say, like, look how dumb the corporate media hacks are. And so it's sort of a virtuous circle, but I do think that it's useful to expose these people. New people are coming to this space every day. And when I was young and looking at videos of like dumb television or YouTube debates, those did help shape how I viewed the world, at least at that point. So it is important to, when you have the opportunity to go on media like that, to do your best to educate people either with the facts or educate people about the nature of the media program that you're on. And I think I did it.
Yeah, I think so. And it's the Brits are a sad empire. The U.S. is looking at a similar fate. Except I think the U.S. has a chance to kind of recover in a way that the Brits did not. Hopefully, if we can make it out of this empire stage alive, then the U.S. I think can recover, because the U.S. is going to be in a different position than Britain was. The British oligarchy still retained most of its viciousness because it was still allowed to be functionally an oligarchy, because all of its investments were still protected by a white man's empire. It's just the headquarters moved to Washington rather than London, or Wall Street, depending on how you want to think about it. So it's like the British have not, even though they lost their empire, they've not really gotten their comeuppance. It's going to come at the same time that the U.S. imperialists get their comeuppance, because then it really is the end of the oligarchy, this transatlantic oligarchy of white power and money. It's coming to an end, I think, and this is remarkable.
That's kind of the dread of watching the imperial collapse, right? You have Britain, which was able to have a soft landing from empire to becoming not normal country, but a country. But it was only able to have such a soft landing because the power shifted from London to Wall Street or London to Washington. But after the U.S. empire falls, where is going to be the new power center for the white power international? The capitalist oligarchy. It's got to be the end. So for me, it seems like there's less of a chance for America to recover. I mean, at least in any healthy way. If the empire falls and there's nowhere for the center of oligarchy to coalesce, what's going to happen?
Well, I think that is the key, is what will it look like in the North America, the United States and Canada in particular. We could put in on the Atlanticist crowd, we can put in the Brits with that. What would it look like if white power is no longer able to be exerted internationally? Because that's really what we're talking about. The question is even the Monroe Doctrine going to hold up with American, white power prevailing over the Southern Hemisphere, or everything Latin America? Like, I don't know that even that is the case. It seems that the level of viciousness that the U.S. would have to avail itself of in the Western Hemisphere would be difficult to sustain. I mean, that's why you see places like Venezuela and Cuba still able to hold out even with a full-on U.S. onslaught, but the world is kind of changing. And so I think once Western imperialism, which is for centuries has prevailed, is really not able to just go around the world and determine how things are going to be, that's where that's where I think that there will have to be some sort of restructuring, or they will just be so terrified of this that they'll just blow up the world to prevent it.
Yeah, that's where it seems we're headed. I mean, I know the next thing is not on the list, but ever present is the risk of Israel starting a bigger war, blowing itself up, and blowing up the world with it. So
yeah, and we'll mention a little bit about that, but I want to, in a moment here, as we start to talk about some subjects related to what I want to get into, which is, of course, the shooting of Donald Trump. So let's talk about this to the extent that we can say. He did indeed get shot in the ear, and it's a very strange spectacle. There's this photo that people are saying is like the new Iwo Jima photo, which is too weird to try to unpack that analogy or whatever. But here's Trump. And I will say that it was a little surprising to me that he was a draft dodger, and grew up with this, kind of vicious slumlord father. Probably didn't.
Draft dodging is respectable, mind you.
I mean, not in his case, because he didn't oppose the American project, in that way. So in his case, I don't think it is. But at any rate, he seemed kind of defiant in a way that sort of surprised me about his character, and that he would have any sort of courage under fire. I was a little surprised by that. I'm by no means pro-Trump at all, and I'm just trying to figure out what sort of terrible forces he represents precisely, because he's a bit confounding. He's hated by some of the worst people, at least they say that they do, Bill Kristol and the neocons and so on, but he's not very good. We're going to talk a little bit about this shooting and aspects of it that we can comment on. And I have another American Exception episode with an interview where I talk about this as well coming up. But over at Consortium News, I think Joe Lauria does a really good rundown on some of the issues of this assassination attempt and comparing it to other ones in the past. So I think people should check out Consortium News, which is Robert Perry's old site that he founded, and then when he died very suddenly, Joe Lauria took it over. So this time there were multiple Zapruder films, and it says, "Don't be surprised if there aren't satisfying answers to the myriad questions raised by the shooting of Donald Trump on Saturday, despite the emergence of dozens of Zapruder quote-unquote movies," writes Joe Lauria. And of course he's referring to all the people that had cell phones on and could record this, kind of like Zapruder was in that perfect position to record the assassination of John Kennedy in 1963. So Lauria writes here, "Among the slew of questions about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump on Saturday in Butler, PA, perhaps the biggest is whether we will ever get any credible answers at all. More than 60 years after the JFK assassination, many questions remain, dividing people who still demand answers. People that, suspect one thing or another, but different things. It seems we'll never get them." Yeah, it seems that way. "Trump as president was supposed to have revealed some of those declassified answers about JFK himself, but backed away after apparent pressure from members of his own administration." So it's good. He points this out. And
it was specifically the CIA. If you look at the reporting at the time,
yes,
I think that might have been Pompeo's tenure there. Might have been before him, though.
Right, and I think that they told him some nonsense about it. It'd be very interesting to know what excuse they used as to why it would be so damaging to the United States. And I wonder if it has any, you can speculate as to why. I'm not going to do that right now, but that could be done.
They showed him the other angle.
I mean, that's the one sort of Bill Hicks joke, right? That there's another secret version where you can really see where the shot came from, and it's so obvious that that JFK was removed by the regime, which was really exercising a veto power over policy of the empire, and
we're in a weird point where you can actually acknowledge that in the mainstream now, and there's not really much of a large penalty for saying it, but the implications of it are just completely ignored and go over people's heads.
Yeah, it is. It's extremely strange, and it's, I think that the fact that the left is such a non-entity politically in the United States, I think like the Kennedy assassination is a good prism through which to look at that, because when you consider that the left, such as it is in the United States, it's so ideologically blinkered that it cannot. Some people on the left believe that they're perfecting their ideology is like a fetish almost, and that as soon as everyone else's ideology is perfected, they'll be clever like them. Okay, but a lot of the people that think that way are people whose ideology prevents them from solving the not so mysterious JFK assassination. Like they literally their ideology stupefies them such that they can't solve what would be like a pretty easy episode of Murder, She Wrote, right? Because but then they think their ideology is like the end all be all, and you should have it like them. You should be exactly like them and understand, how the structure of the system of capitalism and the class hierarchy is simply this force that determines everything, and it doesn't really matter what anybody else does.
But something like this is a little bit more difficult to paint as a Rorschach test for leftists, because we're not even a week out and we don't have all the facts. But even based on the facts we have, we know there's something to be looked at as some sort of obvious Secret Service failure. I mean, any time there's a shooting at a president, there's a Secret Service failure. But then when we look at the nature of the Secret Service failure, you're just left with more questions. And eventually, I think investigators, especially, there's going to be a lot of very pro-Trump people trying to investigate this. I mean, they're an energetic bunch, but I don't trust them with it. It's going to be like QAnon stuff. And if this was some sort of deep event, which I think is a good assumption to work off of, then it likely means that there will be a lot of people spreading deliberate misinformation. Like, after the Kennedy.
Oh, yeah, there already has been.
Yeah,
somebody, that story about the story about the guy who was saying, like, I had him in my sights for 3 minutes and was asking for permission to take them down and wasn't granted it. That turned out to be not a real thing. So somebody already went to the trouble of putting that out there, putting out things that are not true. That could be an individual person.
But we do know that
spooky.
That they were that the shooter was in the scope of the snipers for at least a little bit. No, maybe not in the scope, but in the general direction of where the sniper.
Well,
was
people were shouting to try to alert them about that minutes beforehand. They were saying, "There's a shooter, there's a shooter," and they didn't do anything about it.
In the immediate in the immediate seconds before the shooting, the Secret Service was directly pointing their rifles at the same spot where Crooks was. And you see the Secret Service, I don't know if you have the video here, but you see the Secret Service guy, after the first shot, he appears to look up from his scope, surprised, adjust his position back a little bit, then return fire in the same direction he was already facing, which indicates that maybe not 3 minutes, but there was certainly advanced sighting by the Secret Service, not just people on the ground, by the Secret Service directly.
Right, but my point is that, like, in those circles, you already have things coming out that seem to be disinformation that kind of, because the stories get reported that way, they kind of discredit the whole thing, because some of them were reported as being direct eyewitness testimony from people that were part of the Secret Service, and that wasn't what they were saying. So which is interesting in and of itself. No, people talked about it even on people that were interviewed about it early on, some people that went on Napolitano were talking about it. So some of the people that comment on these things, like Intelligence Matters, did say this. Or actually, it may have been the guy that one of the guys who's really obsessed with the neocons, but he does too much. He kind of goes too much in the Israeli direction, where he's a little bit, not quite sober, I would say, about it. But I think he went on the Napolitano show, and he was one of the people putting it out there.
So he had said that he had seen a Secret Service source.
It was basically something that was on 4chan or something like that, of somebody posting a guy posting an account of the event, saying that I had this person in my sights and was asking for a green light for minutes to shoot him before the shooting happened, and they wouldn't grant it to me. But there wasn't anybody that did that, as I understand it. So anyway, but let's set that aside.
Because the idea, because there are going to be a lot of different stories coming out there, but tracking where sources of obvious disinformation are coming from is also useful. I mean, because
if you can do it, but I don't know that we know the source.
Stuff with the 9/11 truth groups. Deliberately putting out just like insane stuff, like hologram, no plane, space laser stuff. In the early days after 9/11, it seemed to be a controlled opposition. Similarly,
there was one ridiculous guy who sort of acted like the Riddler from Batman, and he was throwing money in the air, being like, "I'll pay you $1 million if you can refute my theories." So it was that seemed to be,
But Roger Stone was actually putting out. He falsely identified the shooter, and I believe he said that there were 2 shooters. And he put out an article that said this in a tweet, and then it was up for a few hours, and then it was gone. But Roger Stone, of course, is one of those agents of chaos, where if he's spreading disinformation, well, I guess maybe that's one place to look at.
Or he just wants, or he just wants publicity. It could be anything with a nefarious fellow like that.
That's true.
But here you see the where these people, where the different parties were here. This was something from our friend, I don't know if he's our friend or not, Media Guy 768 over at Wikipedia Commons, but this was put in the Consortium News article posted this as well, so I think it's a pretty straightforward rendition of the layout here, right? So this part of it, you have where the guy was. You can see him on this building over across the way. I don't know if my arrow shows up here, but he's over here, and there's Trump. Now, the one thing the Secret Service is most famous for is its failure to protect JFK from a sniper's bullets that were supposedly coming from a building all around him. Now, we think that that the kill shot probably came from closer below and to the president's front and right. But regardless, the official story is that there were these snipers. There was a sniper somewhere in a building that had a line to the president and was able to shoot him. So if there's one thing that I would be skeptical that they wouldn't review, it's like obvious sniper positions in the immediate area of the place where you could get off a shot to the president. That I find, that's where the incompetence thing is more difficult to believe.
Well, what's interesting about this building is that it was actually being used as a staging position for local law enforcement at the time of the shooting. And in fact, I don't know if you saw these reports, but 2 police officers actually tried to approach crooks on top of the roof. They hoisted them up to look. They saw crooks. Crooks pointed his rifle at the officer. The officer fell back down off the roof and was injured. And before they could get back up there to do something about it, that's when the shots rang out. And even zooming out, we look at the Secret Service, right? I'm sure you saw the thing, the CNN report about the alleged Iran plot to kill Trump, right?
Yeah, right. That's completely absurd. But they said that Saddam Hussein tried to kill George H.W. Bush too. So this is like something they'll just pull out.
Well, the thing is, they at least they responded to that internally before the public knew about it by increasing Trump's security service detail far above what's normal for a former president or someone campaigning for president. So this was about 3 weeks before the shooting. This was like June 20, late June. But then you have this event, which obviously it's Trump country, so maybe the security risk isn't as obviously high as if he was campaigning in New York or something. But the Secret Service apparently was so short-staffed that the majority of the security at the event was handled by local police. This was Butler County, I think it is, the Butler County Sheriff's Department, or maybe it's the local police department, whichever. And I'm sorry I forget this, but
I think I've heard this. I've heard this.
Yeah, and the actual snipers that were on the roof, at least according to my reading of and this is a Washington Post article, the sniper, they were police snipers. Like this graphic says U.S. Secret Service sniper, but I mean, even the video, the snipers have police written on their bullet.
No, actually, let me preface this by saying that I have not made it my mission to be totally conversant in every forensic detail of this because A, I've been a bit busy, and B, I tend to find that some of the earlier accounts end up getting revised later on, so I'm just sort of going to sit back. But my understanding is that the Secret Service had control over the areas in the immediate area. So all of this stuff would have been Secret Service people, right? Like over here, but then across the way is where it was the local. I think that was the way that they tried to handle the division of labor there between the feds and then the local authorities, was that it was the local authorities that were responsible for this area over here. But then critics of this are saying that is a terrible and foolish way to plan this.
Well, but the snipers on the roof are very clearly marked as police officers. So I don't think
on the roof over.
On the roof behind Trump.
Okay, so maybe that's true.
And
I don't know.
And the New York Times, it was at the New York Times or the Post. One of those demon papers. They reported explicitly that the Secret Service had help from local PD, including in ground forces and the assault teams that ended up taking down the shooter.
Yeah. Okay. So that could be that. Maybe if the cat sniper, what's the CAT stand for? I'm not really sure. But if it's possible that this is wrong, or it's possible that the CAT thing means something related to people that might be deputized by the Secret Service for this particular event, I don't really know.
Yeah, and it might not end up mattering, but I mean these details matter in deep events. But
I mean the point it should have been all Secret Service all around. It should have been all bang up Secret Service people at every position who answered to a central command authority that was directing everything at the site. I would think. Not that this is my wheelhouse, but come on.
Yeah, I mean, well, the sheer idea that the only building that's such an obvious sniper's nest for this event was unsecured. That to me is the biggest red flag. And now the Secret Service, the FBI actually said, yeah, that's pretty surprising in a public statement. And the Secret Service said that, yes, the buck stops here, but it wasn't us. It wasn't our fault. Right. They said they sort of blamed local PD, but then local PD is saying, well, we took all our direction from the Secret Service.
Yeah. I mean, this is very, we'll get into some of these questions because Robert Perry has some more. So let me look at more of or not Robert Perry, Joe
Robert
Lauria.
Perry came back.
Rest in peace, Robert Perry. I wish you were around, but Joe Lauria is trying to hold it down. Okay, here's what Lauria writes. A Kennedy-type plot would be hard to conceive in the age of mobile movie cameras in everyone's possession. There were dozens of Abraham Zapruders in the crowd on Saturday at Butler Fairgrounds. They, and not the mainstream, produced the most revealing videos of the day. Perhaps the most revealing are those that show the shooter on the roof preparing to attack while bystanders loudly alert the police. So that is weird. And then there's this video. Now you can't play the video because PowerPoint doesn't let you embed Twitter videos, and I don't want to pull it up. Besides, it wouldn't be that hard to find it anyway. But this is from our friend DC Drano. New Trump assassin video shows him crawling on the roof while multiple people point him out to police. They yelled about him for almost an entire minute. It's insane how Secret Service allowed this amateur to almost kill Trump. So perhaps that is that's more of the story that's going to emerge, is that they actually did walk up there, confront him. That led to a confrontation with him, and that the policeman falling off the ladder or something to that effect, right, and getting hurt. And then the guy says, "Well, it's now or never," or something to that effect, and then starts shooting because maybe he realized he's already been discovered by the police. So that may be the story, but it seems that there's other questions to be resolved here. Now, he writes, the question is, this is one of the subheadings of the article, cock up or cover up. Cock up or conspiracy is another way to say it. Days later, surprisingly little is known about the 20-year-old government. He's a mystery. After authorities searched his home, car, and electronic devices, interviewed family, schoolmates, and teachers, no clues have emerged about a motive or whether he acted with anyone else. What we now have is a lone wolf, aka a lone nut, without a motive. Even if incompetence is the sole reason for the massive security failure on Saturday, authorities may still try to cover up or downplay evidence that would embarrass and threaten their jobs. How will authorities explain away this massive failure without holding anyone to account? This is what we're about to see. So this, to me, is the big issue. If they're so demonstrably incompetent, then why is no one held to account? This is something that happens with the JFK assassination, for example. There are agents who remove Oswald's name from a secret flash list warning, you know what I mean, that should go out related to the individual Lee Harvey Oswald because of his provocative actions. But somebody proactively went and removed him from that list and was given a momentary reprimand, but then actually was basically cleared of any wrongdoing. So, and in the case of 9/11, all those failures. Yeah, right. Giesling in the JFK case, and I think that there's another one too.
How do we know these obscure names?
Because they've become part of the arcane backstory here. But in the 9/11, of course, we know Black and Blee and Wilshire and all these people that basically made sure that the hijackers were not detected by the FBI, and they're never held to account. They're promoted. If there's no one held accountable for this, then it only lends support to darker interpretations of what happened.
Right. Yeah, it's
do you think what do you think will happen? Do you think they're going to hold someone accountable is my question.
I could definitely see someone getting fired for this, but not held to account in any meaningful way. I could see some Secret Service agent being I could see the head of the Secret Service resigning. I could see that. And it's at the end of a presidential administration, so maybe there's a way to do it gracefully.
And if there was any time you'd want to retire from it, right? It would be right about now, I would think.
Yeah, right about now. But random stuff still comes up. But speaking of the head of the Secret Service, we don't have any. Again, this is just spaghetti on a wall. But one of the weird things, coincidences, that the Secret Service chief is named Kim Cheadle. and she didn't put agents on the roof, but that roof is owned by an automation equipment manufacturer for PepsiCo, and PepsiCo was where Cheeto was previously an exec. So, given that the Secret Service is just a generally spooky agency, and if you're going to be at the top of the Secret Service, you have probably been vetted by the deepest of deep political actors. It doesn't strain credulity to imagine that there might be some connection between the Secret Service and this plot, and the Secret Service head specifically and this plot. But I know nothing about Kim Cheadle, and I know nothing about this building beyond someone on Twitter just dug this up. But it is true.
Well, let me add a little bit about Pepsi, because that angle to me is fascinating. It was Don Kendall, I believe, was one of the people involved with the big bottlers conference in Dallas.
Oh, the Dallas one?
That Richard Nixon was in Dallas on the day of the Kennedy assassination to visit, to be a part of that bottlers conference. And my understanding from talking to Monica Wisak, who wrote a great book on JFK, is that the reason that they had to go through Dealey Plaza is because they wanted a luncheon that day, and they wanted to do it at the place where the Bottlers Convention was being held. And they really worked and lobbied to try to make this happen, and they couldn't get the Bottlers Conference to agree to this. So they had to go, they instead went to the Trade Mart, and because of that, they had to go, the luncheon was planned for the Trade Mart, and then they needed to go through downtown Dallas and Dealey, or they didn't have to go through Dealey Plaza, but that was the route they chose to take. And they wouldn't have if they'd been able to move to the venue that they actually wanted. And the place where that happened was, it was the Pepsi Bottlers Conference, or not the Pepsi, but just the Bottlers Conference. So Don Kendall is there, and also the person, this to me is really wild, the person that Monica identifies as being most responsible for running this thing, and perhaps for refusing to allow it to be moved, was Bronfman. A person who is connected to the mob and extremely pro-Israel, very mobbed up bootleg fortune, right? I mean, this guy
and the
is like
later were the supporters of Epstein,
right? I mean, this is they seem to be part of that sort of syndicate style mafia business going back and up to the later days. So now that all is fascinating to me, but the other fascinating part of it, the Pepsi angle and the with Richard Nixon, is that there's a letter, and this is written about in Family of Secrets, which is an interesting book. At least you could quibble about Russ for different reasons, but we don't need to get into that now. But Don Kendall or Richard Nixon wrote a letter to Don Kendall saying like, "Hey, it was great speaking with you. I'm looking forward to talking to you again. I want you to tell me more about. We can get more into the Bay of Pigs thing." Which was the shorthand that he used to talk about the JFK assassination. So, and Don Kendall, Pepsi, sugar company, very mobbed up company as well. I mean, dealing with the mafia sort of muscle in the Caribbean, especially, the sugar industry is one of the most mobbed up. Sugar and fruit companies are extremely mobbed up. And so Pepsi is like, they would be involved in these sort of the deep political economy of the 20th century. Additionally, Don Kendall was one of the people involved in the Chilean episode. He was helping. He was there. He was later, I believe, as an ITT executive, one of the people responsible for helping to fund if memory serves, the coup that overthrew Allende as well. So that's very interesting that there's a Pepsi angle here to this too, and I don't know if that's significant or coincidence, but it rhymes.
When the books start coming out, it's going to be a difficult thing to track because, again, I think the primary researchers into this will be like the deep researchers who won't just take Secret Service statements at face value. The deep researchers will be right-wing nuts. Will be some of the craziest people you've ever had the misfortune of watching on YouTube, but they will dig up some interesting stuff. Yeah, the same thing with the Hunter Biden stuff. People the most annoying people on the internet were digging into Biden and Ukraine connections for years, And of course, they cobbled it all together, and they would say something like crazy, like, I don't know, like Ukraine is hiring Biden to turn America woke or something. But like the actual individual facts they dug up, sometimes they were very interesting. Like the whole Burisma scandal was a very real scandal, but the right wingers don't really understand how the world works, so they didn't really report on it well. Similar, I think there's not a lot of parapolitically educated minded people who will be definitely looking into this. So when the books and the blog posts start coming out, I'm sure there'll be someone who will sift through all of them. Someone who maybe had a really deep personal connection to Trump, either positive or negative.
Right. I think that there will be a good amount of reporting and research on this of varying quality, but we'll see how this all develops in the coming weeks and months and years, maybe, if we're still around after November. I want to get to what what Loria points out is the key thing to explain.
I miss Perry too.
I know. I kind of I don't mind bungling that because I kind of want to give him a shout out because he did a lot of things that I think were important, including establishing.
I'm still finding interesting like old Perry articles.
Oh yeah. That's so he's weird because he only sort of was more open minded about the JFK assassination later in life. Like in a sense, he was sort of a liberal, like a sad liberal investigator. Like he really tried to do the Woodward and Bernstein thing according to what the myth was. And
he was at AP,
wanted
right?
to investigate these things. He was at AP and Newsweek before, and I think he wrote for a number of newspapers too. So he was a really good person, but he didn't really write about things like the JFK assassination or 9/11. He was very skeptical of those things for psychic reasons. But then later in life, he did write more. He did allow people to write more about the JFK assassination. But he also wrote about deep politics issues. Like the Moon Church, the cocaine coup, a lot of interesting stuff. So his old articles are great. But getting back to Loria and what he's writing today, he has a good list of what needs to be explained from this whole episode still. Did police and or Secret Service see crooks on the roof 26 minutes before the shooting? Okay, this is hopefully some of these questions have already been answered more definitively. Why wasn't the roof he was on just 130 yards away secured? Yes, this is obviously ridiculous in my opinion. Were local cops inside that building as the shooting occurred, as the New York Post reported? After numerous eyewitnesses alerted police to crooks crawling on the roof with a rifle, did police alert the Secret Service snipers? Were the local police and Secret Service on the same radio frequency to communicate? Did crooks really act alone? What was his motive? Did the fierce anti-Trump rhetoric from top Democratic leaders play any role in the shooting? So these are all questions, that would be good to have answers to. And I don't know if any of these have been definitively answered. Do we know that what he says here about the cops in the building as the shooting occurred? Have you heard confirmation of that?
Oh, the cops, I know that they were around the building. I don't know how many were in the building. In fact, one source said, like I said earlier, that they were using that parking lot as a staging area. But then the Times had those cops who went to go check on the roof right before the shooting started. I'm not sure where they were positioned directly prior to that.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Again, there are people. There are probably some accounts on YouTube. I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching this elsewhere, there are people who have gone deep and probably have a very solid grasp of the available facts now. It's not us. We're just talking about it because we find this stuff interesting. If we do,
I'd like to provide some more historical context for it. But as far as up to date details on everything about the shooting, there would probably be people that are more laser focused on this. We will sort out when we have more definitive information. We will revisit this subject. My sense is that we will not get to the bottom of it ever, and that they killed the person. Obviously, and so that's going to make it difficult to get answers. Here is where I get it. I don't have any theory about it at all. There are a number of hypotheses that we could say. It's either lone nut, right? Just a lone nut. That's one possibility, or a plot, an anti-Trump plot, or a pro-Trump plot. Which the pro-Trump one I think is the most far-fetched, but you never know. I mean, you can never put anything past these people. So if it's an let's think for a moment, though, that it is what it seems to be, which is an attempt to assassinate Trump, which it seems to be not something you would orchestrate. It doesn't seem that you would think that the spectacular value of having Trump get his ear blown off and then doing this sort of thing that benefits him in a PR fashion would be, I mean, I think that they can do a lot of crazy things, the clandestine world, but this seems too dicey.
It's all contingent on Trump like turning his head at the right moment. Like, yeah, no. Something the sniper couldn't have predicted,
right?
Just given the distance.
So, but let's think about if it seems that the person had help determining where he could go and possibly pull this off, which that does seem to be quite possible. That he would have had somebody who was going to make it possible for him to get on that roof. What the question that you're left with is, would people, if this clandestine network with the ability to compromise Secret Service, if hypothetically, would they have picked such a person using such a rifle to carry out this task? And that, to me, I would think, no, doesn't seem to have been a crack shooter, and he didn't have a great weapon to use.
He was kicked out of his rifle club for being such a shit shot. He's got Maggie's drawers.
And his shot, right? And his shot was pretty good, considering you've got a guy that far away and you're trying to hit him in the head and you do tag him on the ear. That's pretty close. So the question is would they have arranged for him to go up there and try to kill him this way, given that the chances of it working wouldn't seem to be very good? So then you're thinking, was he there as a patsy of sorts? Like, would they have had other shooters somewhere? Might that be who shot Trump? And it all sounds I have no clue. It could be just straight up incompetence. It seems weird that they would allow the guy to go on the roof so that he alone could try to carry this out, because that doesn't seem like it would be likely to work. And it would seem to make any subsequent assassination attempt less likely to work, as it will lead to security being ramped up. So I just am left kind of confused about it. I could believe he was a lone nut, or I could believe that he was set up to be a patsy.
Yeah. I mean, zooming out, we can look at the people who don't like Trump and the people who do like Trump. And they both have connections to, the security state generally. The people who do like Trump, right now, that seems to be driven by like the Silicon Valley, like Peter Thiel types, general conservative, like far Christian right, and also just big business writ large, like, the big industries writ large, like oil majors. Finance is, of course, always split with Joe Biden and others, but the I guess I'm channeling my Escobar. The Atlanticists, they seem to be the people. The neocons, proper neocons, seem to be the people who are primarily worried about Trump. Like, the Atlantic Council, the NATO heads, the Newlands, like all those people. And for what it's worth, Newland did, or maybe it wasn't Newland, but someone in that milieu did make a comment about putting Trump in the bullseye, which. I mean, we can read too deeply into any statement made in the days leading up to it. But if there is a culprit, I suspect it would be those NATO heads who are really concerned about Ukraine, because the Ukraine people are crazy. They have not been logical from the start, but they seem to have a lot of sway within the security state. So I think that the people who want to keep the Ukraine war going would be the likely deep political nexus that some plot would emerge from. How Thomas Crooks is involved in that? Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't have like I said, I don't have a unified theory. But if I were looking for a theory, that's the area that I would start looking.
I tend to think that if there were a plot, that there was probably another shooter and that Crooks was a patsy. If there were a plot, I do not think that the plotters would have, on the one hand, so much power that they could get the Secret Service to allow a sniper to get into that kind of position, and yet the person they would use would be this dude. It's just, that part seems strange to me. So that's where it seems like, well, He could have been a lone nut, or he could have been there as a patsy. Now, this other issue of this is where I want to get into something besides the assassination today, and it's really about Trump himself, which is how much is he the anti-neocon person? I mean, the neocons on the surface really hate him. Bill Kristol talks about how terrible he is and how he'd prefer the deep state to Trump. But then he puts people like John Bolton in high positions. He destroys the Iran deal, and he moves the capital to Jerusalem, or he moves the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. I mean, this was a move that no other U.S. presidents wanted to do. It's difficult to know exactly what to make of him, but I don't think that he's full on the anti-neocon person. Now, here's an article on Trump and Adelson. Okay, she commits more than $100 million to Trump's campaign. This was written in late May over at The Forward, which is a Jewish publication. And this is, here's what they say about it. In a recent profile in New York Magazine, Adelson suggested that she might want Trump to push for the annexation of the occupied West Bank if he wins his second term, described in the piece as unfinished Israel business from Trump's presidency. Now, when I think of the neocons, I really think of them as being, I've come to believe that despite the domestic, warmonger part of it and so on, that it has been animated in large part by a devotion to Greater Israel, the concept of Greater Israel. I think that before October 7, I knew that this was kind of the general direction that the Zionists were going for, and that they weren't interested in an actual Palestinian state, that they'd backed Hamas specifically to prevent that from happening. I think that I actually underestimated until October 7 and the response to it, the degree to which that was a prime directive, a commandment of sorts, to this political formation of the neoconservatives. And then once you understand, then you go back and look at a lot of these things that have happened, you see where that seems to track. So now, if Trump is really somebody that could be used to advance the crazier parts of the neocon, agenda, especially the top part of like creating Greater Israel and kneecapping the rest of the region, then what do we make of Trump and this kind of a thing? Is he really the enemy of the neocons?
I think that the Biden administration represents two tendencies within the far right imperialist, right? The Ukraine business and the Gaza business, they don't seem to have the same people pushing for them, except within the administration. But like if we look at all these think tanks and these centers of political ideology, they seem to be pushing on different ends. Trump will almost certainly be more vicious than Biden on Israel. And everyone understands this. I mean, I think during the debate, Trump was like, no, the reason we don't have a peaceful settlement in Gaza is because Israel doesn't want one. And we should let them keep going. And we should let them go crazy. Like the Biden administration, for its part, even though it's hamstrung by the overriding political reality of Zionism in America, so they can't cut aid. But they do seem to be.
People like Blinken are straight up devoted to it, though. Blinken is not like, oh, my arm is being twisted. I mean, from my understanding, Blinken is the power of the lobby over is manifest in the fact that he puts Blinken in that position in the first place.
That's true. But at least in their actions,
that doesn't conflict with what you're saying. It just sort of makes it even
their
more
actions.
clear.
I mean, they've been pushing for a peace settlement. I mean, they sent Bill Burns there to try and negotiate in Doha and in Qatar. So Hamas and Israel, it's Israel, the people who are very against it.
I do think that the Biden administration does recognize that this is not to their advantage,
because they don't want a bigger war. They don't want a bigger war in the Middle East, which is something that at least it would appear that neocons, at least of the Bush era neocons, that would be something that they would be pushing for. But on Ukraine, which is a separate issue, which is truly about the actual empire, right? Israel could get everyone in Israel could pack up and move to Poland, and that wouldn't change much of the great power competition in the world. But this Ukraine business does. And I think there are a major faction of people who are committed to using Ukraine to bleed Russia as much as possible because they're seeing this new multipolar world. While the Zionists are focused on their stupid Israel project, there are people who are thinking about the big issues like, Ukraine. And on Ukraine, Trump does not appear to be on board in any capacity. He doesn't seem to have any special care for what happens, whether or not Russia takes Ukraine, whether or not Ukraine fights back or whatever. He doesn't care. He was very critical of NATO. And I think his instinct is still to be critical of NATO. So I think that there are two tendencies, right? The Biden tendency to push for Ukraine and push for Israel. The people pushing for those things might not have the same interest as Trump. The Israel people might, but I mean, they are overriding and super powerful, but they're not the only game in town when it comes to, like political forces in the country.
No, well, it's difficult. I don't feel that I have a total grasp on what Trump really plans to do to revise the situation.
One more thing. I will say that there is, given the fact that there is more coverage critical of Israel in the mainstream lately, that also indicates that there is a segment of the overriding political authority that is less devoted to Zionism than some of the more crazy.
That's been the case. I mean, that's when I think back of like Brzezinski, talking in front of Congress in like 06, 07, saying there's going to be a terrorist attack. It's going to be blamed on Iran, and they're going to use it to start a war that'll be disastrous for the region and for the United States. That's like them pushing back on it. Or Reagan at the end of his presidency, and he wants to recognize the PLO and say that acknowledge that they have stopped supporting terrorism. And then on the neocon, super Zionist side, they're like, no, they're still terrorists. They're still terrorists. And you're thinking like, why are you so invested in accusing these people of terrorism when they're denying that they do it? And the terrorist acts really only make sense politically if they are claimed by the group that does them for X, Y, and Z reasons. Why are they so obsessed with saying that the PLO is still practicing terrorism? And the reason is because they don't want any partner that they can negotiate. They want to be able to say we can't negotiate with them because they're terrorists. And the reason they want to be able to say that is because they really want to just keep expanding settlements and taking more and more of the land, changing the facts on the ground so that eventually it's a fait accompli that they've got their greater Israel. So, but people in the U.S. have realized that that wasn't the right thing to do, people that had the national interest in mind. But for whatever reason, the Zionist side, the neocon side, is able to get a critical mass of control over the command of U.S. foreign policy, especially in the aftermath of George H.W. Bush's election. Probably is what led to George H.W.'s defeat. Whether Bill Clinton was really their man or not, the important thing was defeating Bush, because Bush was a person who was interested in a two-state solution. He saw it as being in the U.S. national interest, and he represented the old Eastern establishment CFR crowd that really wasn't as pro-Israel. Didn't put Israel at the center of everything, whereas this greater Israel concept is something they're obsessed with. So the neocons need the neocon like intelligentsia, like Crystal and the PNAC crowd. They recognize that Ukraine and the Middle East situation are related, because the way that they get greater Israel is by having a situation where the U.S. and Israel together, where the West is the White Power League, with headquarters in London, Tel Aviv, and Washington, and on Wall Street, that these are the dominant forces in the world that are unassailable. And so Russia, making sure Russia is weak, and it doesn't build on its alliances with places like Syria or Iraq or Iran or other countries that it's allied with at present or at different times. That's their obsession. And so for, I think, the neocon intelligentsia, they see these as related. Perhaps Trump is so corruptible and answerable to money that people like Adelson recognize that they can move him on particular issues, which are really the only things that they care about. And so it's six on one hand, heads they win, tails they don't lose. Like they either get Biden, who they own, he's like the IPAC guy. Ultimately, he might make noises one way or another about, hey, don't go into Rafah or I'll have to stop giving you bombs. And then like they go into Rafah and he's like, well, I'm giving you slightly smaller bombs to blow up children with now, right? So maybe you see that Biden's not doing much about them, but he's more on board with the full-on neocon PNAC, Project for a New American Century, including NATO and kneecapping Russia. Trump, for whatever reason, seems that he may have some inclination towards peace with coming to a understanding with Russia, maybe deluded enough to think that they can pull Russia away from China. So maybe the neocons despise him for that, or maybe part of it is that this is a way for the neocons to almost launder their reputation, because look at Trump, look at them, don't look at us. Don't think about the Iraq war, don't think about torture, don't think about the Palestinian, the genocide in Gaza. Think about the orange man and how scary he is and how bad he is for democracy and how he doesn't have good manners about, different minority groups in the United States. It's terrible, terrible.
Well, at least as far as the difference between Trump and Biden goes, it's really no effect on Israel. Like for us, the people who want to see Israel, end its occupation, end its apartheid, end the genocide, both of them are going to support it, no matter what. So if you're like a rational, sober Israel supporter, and you're like one of those two guys who are rational, sober Israel supporters, then you really don't have any difference of opinion about Trump or Biden. But if you're a fanatic who will accept nothing less than, accept Israel's demands, all of them, 100%, no matter what, well, then, yeah, you're going to like Trump more. You're going to be like, yeah, Trump's our guy. He put his hands on the orb, the Abraham Accords, moving the embassy, et cetera, et cetera. He's very easy to push. And he's been in the New York milieu for quite some time. And so a lot of the Zionists out of New York have a direct line to him.
Right. Yeah, and I would just add to that the ironic thing about all of this is that I don't think that any of these people that Trump or Biden are friends to Israel in the most meaningful sense, because this greater Israel business is really, it's a genocidal, blood and soil fascism, and it is ultimately going to, I think it's more likely to destroy the project and the whole Zionist project to begin with, that in retrospect, they should have found a way to have a workable